space business. My father started in the early 1950s here at the Space Center here. A rocket called the Viking, which was basically the U.S. version of the B-2 that the Germans had, and so he started throwing things out in the ocean here like in the early 50s. I grew up, that's what I did, that's all I did. I can speak acronym if you, that's what NASA runs on acronyms. I can speak acronym before I can speak English, very much so. That was our dinner table talk and everything else. So he went on from that program, he went to the X-17, which was a hypervelocity spacecraft that would go up to a certain altitude, pitch over, and then fire another rocket, to get extra speed. And then went to Vanguard, which we'll talk to here, which part of the motivation that I had in my life. From Vanguard, he went to various programs with Titan. Not the Titan ICBM version, thank goodness, but the Vanguard Laboratory, the Dinosaur, which these were all proposed spacecraft that would fly on the Titan II, which took us to Baltimore, where we spent some time in that area. He came back to the Cape after the Apollo fire. My dad ran quality for the spacecraft for the Apollo program, and my father-in-law helped build the lunar module, so we've got some pretty good connections there. And then he went into the shuttle program after that, retired out of the shuttle program. My brother was a director for launch operations for the shuttle program. One sister was a life scientist, now with the VA system here, and the other sister built launch pads. So we kind of a space state. My two heroes growing up were Alan Shepard, who was the first American in space, and Wallace Shaw. I got to meet both of them. In fact, I got to work with Wallace Shaw quite a bit. So they both went to the Naval Academy, then became naval aviators, and then got selected for the Navy. There it was, lined out for me. I knew exactly what I needed. So didn't quite work out that way. I made it through the Navy side. I was a Navy astronaut. But it was a bad year for astronauts. So it was the year of the challenge reset. So, but that's the start. Center for Applied Space Technology, we're not-for-profit. We were created at the request of the NASA Life Sciences folks when the Columbia mishap happened, the Columbia shuttle. At that point, they determined that all they were going to do is fly out, building the International Space Station. And once that was complete, there would be no more shuttle. There was a lot of technology that was out there that we knew that eventually we were going to be needing it again. So the idea was, let's create a not-for-profit, we'll transition some of that technology, and it would be my job to find places where we could put that, where it would either maintain its status quo or develop it on somebody else's time until it was time for it to come back. Interestingly enough, our first work was with drones. So had nothing to do with any of it except we did do some work on using unpiloted systems, helicopters looking at the moon, and if you've been following any of the Mars exploration, Mars just had a helicopter to do all that. So I don't know that they got their idea from us, but as far as today's concerned, yeah, they did. So that's our organization. We're small. There's just a couple of us, but we've had some really interesting people that work with us. We're kind of like a clearinghouse. People come up and say, I've got this idea, such and such, and we'll either get the right people to try to make it happen. So I've been the principal investigator on several projects, which I'll talk to you later. And what I want to do is show that there's no helping you determine the roadmap, how do you want to go, what do you want to do next, what do you want to do, what kind of degree do you want to have, et cetera, et cetera. There's no one way to do that. So I've looked, I've scanned, I've seen there's a lot of engineers in here. My daughter was an international relations person, now she's running the human cell therapy lab today. So there's no direct pathways. It's never stop learning, never stop learning, and keeping your eye on what it is that you're doing. And I hate to say this out loud, but never say no. If somebody says, do you, the answer is yes. You can always change your mind afterwards. Some of the neatest things that we've done in the past people have said, hey, would you, or do you, or whatever. The answer is always yes. So, now let's see if somebody who has technology in their name can make this thing work. probably saw that coming in, affectionately known as the rocket garden. This is the Mercury, Redstone Mercury, the first two suborbital American launches. Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom launched in that. They went about 300-something miles out of the ocean. I think the flight was like 15 minutes. So suborbital. This you can't see very well, but this is the Atlas that replaced that for the Mercury program. So it started with John Glenn. Our orbital flights were on this the Atlas. So when you get out there, you know that. That's the regular Redstone for rockets. That's a Thor. That's an Atlas with the Regina upper stage for launching satellites and everything else. This is the Delta, which was flying right up until a few years ago. So a lot of our interplanetary probes were launched with the Delta. They could have a number of these boosters on the side, depending on what the payload was, what the weight, everything else. And, this baby here is the one I was talking about. This is the Titan 2. It's got a Gemini capsule at the time. So Mercury was single piloted, Gemini was 2, Apollo was most football player 3. And the Saturn 1, which I have a story for that too. But the Saturn 1 was basically taking 8 of these and building the first stage for that. Most of those were ICBMs before they became helium. So that's just a little bit when you had that opportunity. That's my connection with all of them.
Sorry, we have it right there. Southern one is real estate.
Yep. You'll see it when you're out there. Redstone Mercury, the Atlas Mercury, and the Saturn. The Saturn was the Saturn 1 for human spaceflight after the fire, after the Apollo fire, after that we configured the International spacecraft itself. While Schirra flew what we call return to flight, and that was on the Saturn 1. That was Apollo 7. And it went from Launch Complex 35, which is now kind of a memorial out of this space time. And then it was flown again for the Skylab missions. So it has had human involvement. That's John Glenn's launch, that's Alan Shepard's launch. So that was the first American. We didn't have an eject on his way down like the Russians did.
Okay, it's flat down now.
Yeah, they weren't sure how the landing was going to be, so I think it's 60,000 feet to get them out of the station. They parachuted the rest of the way. And again, interesting fuel, if you're into such things, goes mostly hyperbarics, diethyl hydrazine, and some other things that they did. Very, very volatile, very corrosive. So most of these rockets are what we call terabytes. They use kerosene as a fuel and liquid oxygen as the oxidizer. So you can see the tanks would be lined up on top of each other. And that was a two-stage orbit. I can't remember numbers come and go, but I think you're talking about 200,000 foot-pound thrust.
200,000.
I think it's 200,000. I know the Mercury was 75,000. So these are probably not the best pictures you'll see of the Saturn 1, and that's the Apollo 11 stack on its rollout. The reason they're up here is because I took those pictures. Those are my pictures. I was there for the Skylab mission. This was called the milk stool because the structure was set up for the Saturn V. So they built this structure rather than build a whole new tower, which you can probably see the one that built Artemis. They just built this milk stool and put the smaller Saturn 1 on top of it. That was rolling out of the VAB that morning. It's pretty cool to see. In those days, it wasn't like you picked up the phone, take 400 shots, throw it into the internet. You took the photos, sent it to the drugstore to develop, 2 or 3 weeks, months, or years. Later, you would get it back. So when I get my thumb in one of them, didn't know until it's too late to do that. I like them again, like I said, I was there, I took those pictures. That's me, by the way, you can't tell, not the old guy. The old guy is David Mitchell, who was Apollo 14, he's a little wrong. Doesn't look like it. It's his house. I was supposed to meet him at his house, and I kept driving by because it's just a little kind of block house. And then this guy standing out there with his suspenders and a dog, he's waving at me, and I'm like, okay. Now, you step inside, it's like an Apollo museum over there. He only flew one mission, and that was Apollo 14. That's what they used in the lunar lander. When they got back up to orbit, reconnected with the space crew with the command module. He and Alan Shepard was the other pilot, ripped those out of the spacecraft because they just didn't get back the lunar module building back pressure. So that's why I have to look on my face. Alcohol was not involved. Because he said I could touch that too. Everything that you landed on the moon with. That's, for me, that's a pretty big deal. So he's quite a guy, very interesting guy. If you read about him, he's the one who did the ESD experiments. He's also the one who told me that he could put his thumb up and make the Earth disappear. Pretty interesting. When you talk to people that have been on orbit, it's one thing, but when you talk to people that have been on another place, everybody wants to stay on the planet. But when they've been another place looking back, it's a whole different perspective. This is the last of the shuttle missions. That's Atlantis, which is in the building over there. We got to go out for the rollout. This is coming again out of the DAB, my pictures again. I thought it was pretty dramatic. It went right up the road, right past us. That's how they would do it with that big crawler that they used for the Saturn. We just modified it for the shuttle program, and it would go out to the back. We'll see the crawler blade break off either 39A or 39B. So, and again, everybody knows SpaceX because you're watching it the other day. So if you're watching tomorrow, if you're someplace where you can see it, if you're watching. I think it's in the morning, but I don't know. If it is, those are the best. When you're just getting the rising sun and you get that, what they call jellyfish, where that big gas ball comes out.
So we did see one like 3 days ago, but it wasn't in the travel. So we'll have to see.
It's like this tomorrow. And I'll check on time. Yeah, I would definitely.
We can arrange it.
I don't know where you're going to be tomorrow morning, but you can see it from Orlando. You can see it from I think it's pretty good pictures up in Jacksonville, which is 2 hours later. So, and seeing that jellyfish is pretty cool. And you see it when the sun rays or certain things. And then this is what's down the road. That's obviously that's Artemis program. That's here. That's rolling out to what's called 39B, Launch Complex 39B, and that's SpaceX and Starship, which has provided all sorts of entertainment for us. One of them is going to go to the moon, maybe both. Okay, so just a little bit about the economy. This is, again, it's a global picture, but it has a lot to do with what's going on here. And I know that you may or may not want to be here, or work here, or whatever. I'm not going to be political about anything, except this is a real interesting time for this country. Maybe I'll call you guys up to see if I can come down here. So, but if you haven't seen the numbers, by the way, this is the movie Wall-E. Have you seen that? Yeah. That's real. That's what. There's 35,000 objects that are being tracked in going orbit right now. Every one of those orange dots represents one of those. So Wall-E was not that far-fetched. Of course, when you expand space, it's not like you're going to dodge and find your way out. We're getting there. So, but there's a lot of, what's happening is that there's a lot of transition right now in the industry. So you don't have to be necessarily involved in aerospace to take advantage of some of the space systems. And that's being knowledgeable about what you can do and can't do is important. I talk about this a little bit. We basically brought space-based medicine to one of the largest largest medical in the United States, the America. And the first thing that happened when I was talking to the doctors is, well, have you ever thought about flying something that's on a space station? We can do that? Yeah, we can do that. So he's flying, I think he's got three different projects that I ISS right now. I'll talk to him a little bit in just a minute. He just received the NASA Researcher Review Award and all that kind of stuff. So that went from, you can do that? So, yes, you can do it. And you'll find, especially as you start looking at data processing, communications, all those kinds of things, that whatever business that you want to be in, there's going to be a role for space things like that. And I can tell you that that's what Amazon's counting on, that's what SpaceX is counting on, that's what everybody else is doing with constellation and that's what that there's going to be this business to do for all of that. So even if you don't go directly into an aerospace or aerospace related industry, that opportunity is still there. So know as much as you can. Again, competitive advantage, knowing about it, knowing it's there. The Mayo Clinic is doing stuff that other hospitals, research hospitals wish they could do. They're all behind trying to catch up. So, and again, 2035, you guys will have to tell me how that turned out. I don't think I'll be here to see it, but that's pretty intense amount of money that's involved. And that's 35,000, double it. These constellations that are going up. I worked for on a constellation for Australia. We were putting 26 satellites up. And we thought that was a big deal. I think tomorrow when SpaceX launches, we'll probably double that just the satellites that we put out for launch. So again, it's got to be part of your business strategy, and I can't emphasize this enough. Having a well-developed talent pipeline, having those calls, taking advantage of opportunity, like you're doing right now. This is great. You're able to go in, you have knowledge, pick up something that you really like, study it, learn what you can about it, see who's doing it, how maybe you can apply in Chile or Argentina or wherever else it is that you want to work and make it happen. I've got some ideas about that too. So this is what I call the sort of the trail markers. This is, and again, I'm looking at mine. I find that my life is a little bit different. You guys are going to go to the Naval Academy, you're not going to be Navy pilots, maybe you are. But these are the things that I think are really important as far as, I think in any industry, but definitely for what I've done at working in the space business. So have a vision of what it is that you want to be able to do, sketch out how you think you can get there. Know that isn't how it's going to go. Okay? Understand that the pathway that you think you're going to follow is something to deviate from, because that's how that is. That's how that's going to turn out. So if it doesn't work out that way, let me know, because you're the first person. I was a professor at the University of Florida. I had 255 students go through. 5 of 255 graduated in the major study. It's life. It happens. Everything changes. So, develop a reputation. And that goes to that, don't say no. Yeah, say yes. And not only say yes, throw an idea out there. And that comes from never giving up on the education side, continually learning. I spent maybe an hour this morning just going through all the news, medical news, and the aerospace news to see what's going on. Ars Technica, if you don't have a subscription to that, it's a freebie. They put out a newsletter on space, tells you exactly what's going on and all the different companies and stuff. So you're aware of that if space is the way you want to go. Connections, same thing. You guys are all can all cite me as a connection. I'll give you my email address at the end. Can't promise you an answer, but I'm trying. But anyway, make the connections in the industry that you want, connections and things that you hadn't thought that you might want to do, but maybe somewhere down the road, there's that opportunity. We were talking beforehand. Tony Bennett, my parents listen to Tony Bennett, so I know that you guys know. But anyway, Tony Bennett's kids are all space nuts. We took them to the Space Center. Those are good connections because they were able to connect us to other people. Plus they brought us together, which is pretty cool. Integrity. Again, I come from a military background. I was a combat search and rescue pilot or a special ops pilot. If I said I was going to be somewhere or do something, that meant I was going to be somewhere and I was going to do it. And you don't necessarily find that in business unit. So that means be the model. Don't follow everybody else does. There are a lot of things that are going on right now that started off in March. That people said that would never happen or whatever. That never really happen. So that's the way integrity works. maintain integrity. There's nothing more important. Once you lose integrity in the profession, it's very hard to get it back. Perseverance, I talked about the Vanguard. It blew up. I don't know if you don't know Vanguard. Would have been the first satellite, TV one. They went, settled back on the pad, blew up. My dad brought a piece of the rocket home, and went out and cleaned it up, I guess. I don't know what he did. I was not very young. But anyway, he brought a piece of the rocket home. That was, for my family, that was an important reminder that, hey, this was failure. This was good. Failure was an option. You did fail, but you learned from your failures. And every one of us, I told you what my siblings all did, my dad did. Every one of us, cites that piece of Vanguard rocket as an inspiration for not giving up, for continuing, for persevering. So, and knowledge, you can't be too smart. That's the way it is. As smart as you might think you are, there's always going to be somebody smart. And learn from them. Find those people. Spend time with those people. And when people start spending time with you, then you know that they got the same advice. You're the guy there. Or the gal. So, but those, to me, that's what creates opportunity in what you want to do in space. That's my opinion, but it's been well tested. Speaking of Vanguard, there it is. Flaming debris. That's the rocket, the satellite that made it too far, picking up out of the rest of that. I think it's in the Smithsonian, but I'm not positive of that. The rocket is. My father had Alzheimer's. It got kind of rough. He wasn't able to remember things. He kept talking to me about a dog he had when he was a kid. He called me. I'm sure but what I've learned since learning is that there's a period just before the mental part goes to completely. But that happened on July 20th, before my father passed away. And that, of course, July 20th was the day Apollo 11 landed on the lunar surface. My office was out here at Espacial. I drove over by 49A, which is where they launched them. I spent some time there reflecting, and my dad was, they call it a wanderer. They had a walker down, basically. He was confined. And I went in, and there were all kinds of things that I'm not even going to make yourself include. But I was really surprised, because my dad was very alert that day. And I walked in, and I told him, I said, yeah, she's out, Apollo 11. That was the pinnacle of his career, when I was getting to the moon, doing all these things, and the president landed it so funny. And me, as the director, was involved in it, was. And I said, so all the projects that you worked on, what was your favorite? And I'm expecting some gibberish answer or something like that. He goes, Vanguard. Yep, gibberish answer. And I said, why Vanguard? And he said, because you can put your arms around it, if you feel its heartbeat, you can listen to it breathe. I know. The easiest to find systems engineering? Yes. That is systems engineering. As a pilot, that's what I would do with my aircraft before I would fly. I would just go and just see if I could feel whether we were sinking that. People say, well, strap that airplane down and such as knows there's a relationship that you have with the aircraft that you flew. So that's in the book I'm writing. By the way, you'll see it in my book. I haven't read it. This is my career path. Talked about the Naval Academy. That's Annapolis. It's in Maryland, in the Chesapeake Bay. That was me when I was your age. And that was when I'm probably not really a naval officer because I was commissioned by President Nixon, who resigned the presidency about a month later after we were commissioned. You better ask her next time. My mom, the short one, and the woman who became my wife was the other one, putting my ensign bars on. But that was my leading. As I said, my heroes, that was the first step towards the career. I got selected for aviation program, so that was the second thing to do. And the aviation side of it, again, I was lucky enough, I started off a helicopter, turned down jets 3 times, which was unheard of. But I also had a marine biology background. I flew a helicopter in the ocean, and saw whales and sharks and dolphins, things like that. Wow, this is what I would do. When you're doing the speed of heat, you don't see those things. So I went into helicopters, and after my first 2 deployments, they gave me the opportunity to transfer out of postgraduate school. Worked in applied physics. They gave me the opportunity to transition to jets at that time, which I did. So I would go fly a jet for 4 hours, come back, get something to eat, and then go fly a helicopter for 5 hours. And I built up that kind of nobody's business, which helped me in becoming a national. But again, it's not saying that. I'm saying, hey, you want to do this? Yes. Yes. There's a lot of work. And when you think about spending 12 hours of your life in an airplane every day, that's a lot, especially in a challenging environment. So, but it provided me with the opportunity to do what I wanted to do. Now, as Marvin mentioned, I also, when I was an undergraduate, I started off in pre-med, but I realized that I had to work with sick people, and that was not where I wanted to be. So I changed into biological oceanography and physics, my degrees, and SeaWorld of Orlando had just opened at the time. They didn't know how to say no to me. Follow the rule, right? Yes. So okay, I'm doing this project with bioacoustics. Can I come down and work with the research team? No, we don't have a research team. But yeah, you can come down. We are research team. So for 6 weeks, I had 2 dolphins and a whale. And I doesn't get much good. Which was part of my decision, by the way, also, in helicopters. So that's an orca, I'm sure both countries are familiar with them. We see the video of orca chasing 4 seals up on the beach all the time. So I worked with those quite a bit. Very, very good as far as bioacoustics. And that's a leatherback sea turtle. Jenny, that's the harness I talked about. We don't use it anymore. That one's called China Grill. There are a lot of things we learned, but that's all satellite tracking. We did that in the office over in Spain. So I was able to help bring the Upscale Research Institute from San Diego to Stanford, Florida, and then we developed a capability for the advantage of just all kinds of sea turtles, whales, or whatever else. So again, it's an opportunity. It's building up that experience. It's not saying that it's taking charge. It's an opportunity. It wasn't the first thing I wanted to do, whether it's good press or return to flight or show. So when they found out that I'd been, I just put it on. So when you get to 36, you got it. Hold that slide on the time. So why don't you develop a project and see what happens? So we developed. I had experience first with Shannon Lucid, had spent time on here, where she had real serious issues with osteoporosis. She lost a large percentage of her bone density in microgravity. And here's a little tip. So just like a pilot problem when you're working on something, come up with a solution to the countermeasure, test it, and while we test it, that's it. Second project. Yeah, we know that's a pipe. We know that. We see that. We're going to do that. So we developed what was called the aquatic librarian system. That's what we're saying in Professor Adams. SeaWorld, probably the #1 place in the world for making artificial saltwater. So if we want to go with marine organisms, we're looking at calcium-based organisms because our diamonds are based on those. So we were flying decapods and coral. I was at NASA headquarters 3 times a month. We have met with the administrator more than once. The whole idea that we would have been the first commercial payload on the International Space Station at that time. And, of course, the SeaWorld had to get something out of it, so they would have to run commercial payload specialists who would get to fly every time that payload through to do the research. 7-year process, again, perseverance, how to give up. 7-year process of people calling me up and saying, yeah, we already did teach you in space. This is, obviously didn't read it. And then on a Friday, I got a call from a friend of mine who's an astronaut at the head of the astronaut office and said, guess what? Don't pack your bags yet. I'm not going to use it in training yet. But the project's been approved. And Saturday morning was the conference. So that's it. And in space to go fight the Russians. We only have so many shuttles left. But that's it again, perseverance for the opportunity. In 2003, still before most of you were around, I developed cancer. I was treated over in Orlando, and I had this thought in my head that there's got to be something better. So I went home, wrote a paragraph about how to work. What I knew about cancer was just that I knew it myself. I didn't know what I know now, which is still not enough. But one person responded. 1,000, supposedly, this is the legend, they went to 1,000 people in the medical system, 3 male hospitals. Phoenix, the mothership, which is up in Minnesota, and in Jacksonville. They went to all the clinician researchers in this. One responded, I was in his office the next day. You can see the back of his head right there. It's Dr. Abazudo. And he's Nigerian born, was apparently the top of his high school class in Nigeria. The president of Nigeria at the time came back and said, Abba, you can be anything you want. What do you want to be? I want to be an astronaut. Abba, why don't you become a doctor? So he went to med school, and he ended up with me in Florida. I was sitting in his office, and as I said, we can do that. We flew, I brought in the right people, fortunately, but we flew mesenchymal, and just know these are stem cells. If you're not in the medical side, I wasn't either. Mesenchymal, which are the cells that we use in transplants for most part. We also use them quite a bit in bioprinting and things along those lines. Hematopoietic cells, which are the blood cells, that's where your T cells, B cells, all of those come from the hematopoietic cells. And then as an algae, we flew leukemia, 536. We got them up on space station for 30 days, and then came back. We were the first commercial launch from 39A, which, for the Navy, for the space guy and space people, that was really right there. I didn't care for research. As I said, these things go on and other things. This other, the back of this gentleman's head, that's Bob Twiggs. If you're familiar with CubeSats, that's the father of the CubeSat. If you're not familiar with it, you will be able to get another lesson. So that was supposed to be the first, that day was supposed to be the first launch, SpaceX launch at the Cape to get scrubbed. So we got to go into the hangar. That's the first SpaceX launch. That bird right there. So, and it, just in case you can't tell. That was me. So it was kind of a cool opportunity. A lot of neat things came in. But again, it's pulling that together. That's astronaut Peggy Whitson, just came back. She's now flown more hours than I can get in there ever. She's now flying with Taxi, which is a private space company. She was up on the space station for 2 weeks. I think they came back 3 days ago. She's actually doing our research with the mesenchymal cells in that work. So, again, first year, because of reputation, we get asked, hey, would you? This was a big would you? The answer was yes. You can't really tell, but it's really a sounding rocket. The company's called Exos. This is in New Mexico. It's called Spaceport America. They had the rocket, but they didn't know how to fly payloads in it. And there was a thing that was developed for the space station called, or for the shuttle program called BRIC, Biological Research and Chemistry, BRIC, acronyms, and then we call it. I said, well, why don't you get some more bricks from NASA to fly those? They did. And they said, well, since you gave us this good idea, we have everything you want to fly. So we flew 6 missions with them. Flew glioblastoma cells, brain cancer cells, and learned some interesting things from that. I've got a couple of papers that you'll see that come along with about 100 other people. But that's one that came from that, was the glioblastoma research that we were able to do with this. And one of the things we learned is that there's actually a difference in the way glioblastoma develops in a woman and in a man, which they did not do that prior. So that's the group. I'm the tall guy in the middle. I'm the only non-doctor in that picture. They're all male doctors. The glioblastoma was Cesar's project. He's in med school at Stanford right now. So very, very, very smart group. One of them flew an apple. I got to tell you, flew an apple watch because apparently there's some fruit like a tomato or an orange or something. Anyway, it gives like like a human signature to the watch. So the watch's measurements, flight history. So we flew an Apple Watch over the state launch, and the rocket blew up. Pieces of it all over the desert in Mexico. And I got a picture, hey, does anybody claim any of this? I see the Apple Watch over there. So I get a picture, I give it to David for you, Dr. David, he's a neuroscientist. And he took the picture and went to the Apple thing, because apparently, I don't have an Apple Watch, but apparently they'll replace it if you can show how it is. It's the whole thing. What happened to him? He got blown up by a rocket. So he didn't get his watch replaced, but that's, I think he's the only person I know that has that tale to tell. This is one we just finished. In NASA parlance, and maybe this will be true in the Chilean and Argentine space programs, the first thing you do is develop an acronym. Second thing is you develop a patch. And then you decide what your project is. So, this is when I was the PI for this. That's if you bomb a comet, parabolic flights, you go up, it's like a big roller coaster, you do about 30 seconds of microgravity, and you do it again, you do it again, you do it again, you do it backwards. Our whole thing was, we had a, yes.
How long is the time when you do the zero gravity?
How long? About 30 seconds. 30 seconds each time you come down with gravity. You're floating around if you're not doing research, and then they give you a warning. And the first time I did it, I think I did 40-something bumps on these things. But the first time I did it, I wasn't paying attention to what was underneath me. Boom! Get off me! Go on, please! You learn sort of to do
Sorry, that kind of experience is part of the training?
Yeah, well, the astronauts can do that training. We can hire you. If you have $8,000, I can get you.
Okay, all right.
In this case, I had a research project. NASA gave me $750,000 to do this project. And what we did, the representatives of the one company is Selfie, which is a Swedish company. They do bioprinting. They're probably the largest bioprinting company in the world. The other one is Redwire. Redwire, I was working with Navy Space, and Redwire bought Navy Space. So I had to work with them also. Navy Space had the first printers, the first 3D printers in space. They went on the space station, and somebody realized that they had a tool missing or something. So these guys were like, hey, just give us the specs on the tool. They sent it up there and printed the tool and asked for the astronaut station. So, but they got absorbed by Redwire. I've mentioned Maria Peterson, that's Maria in the red top. In case you can't tell, I'm the guy dealing. Again, I'm the principal investigator. We flew 2 days. We flew mesenchymal cells on the first day. We flew brain cancer initiating cells, BTLCs, on the second day. To see if we could, what we found in microgravity is that cells and structures develop like they do in the room because gravity's in the room. So everything as it is in the room is supported. So you get 3D clusters of cells developing. And as far as characteristics are concerned, pretty much the same as the ones that develop. If you were to take stem cells from you and look at them there, they have pretty much the same characteristics, except for the more immunosuppressive, which is one interesting thing. And two, again, they form these structures that you can't form with human condition. So our thing was, well, let's take it another step further. Let's see if we can put tissue these days. Because those tissue, the next organs. In this country, at any given time, there's about 115,000 people on the organ donation list waiting for them. My next door neighbor in Orange Park was number one on the lung transplant list. One came available, was not suitable for him, he died before another one was available. So there's a lot of motivation for this. And I know just talking to you, there are people in here who have relatives or family, close family, who have dealt with cancer, who have dealt with some kind of organ requirement or something like that. So that's where I am. That's where I want to see this. Theoretically, I have a very, in fact, he was just released from the hospital yesterday. He has multiple myeloma, has had to deal with that. He did the usual standard treatment, which was the chemotherapy, the radiation. Chemotherapy, radiation. And they came up with, okay, let's do a bone marrow transplant. So there's two types of transplants. One is called autologous, auto meaning they're using new cells. So it's your own cells that are done. Why that's important is because you don't run into graft versus disease. You know, your body tries to reject those cells. So then he had that, it lasted for about 6 months, and then cancer came back. He went through a couple of clinical trials. This is the 7-year process. Finally, they did one using somebody with donors stem cells. Which again, if you can do it, put yourself on the donor list. It's a huge thing. Here we are, the United States, our population, all the other stuff that we are. He got his cells from a 23-year-old in Germany who put his name on the list. There was, I think there were 12 parameters that they looked for, and he matched on 11 of those 12. But there was nobody on the donor list in this country that matched on that many. So he got cells from I can say to you because I'm not 23. I don't remember. He got cells from somebody who donated it in another country in another time. So it's really, really important. I tell this quite a bit. I've been to the top of my mountains. I've done these successful stuff. This is what's important. This is what you make a difference. That's what I'm about right now. So again, I throw these things out because somewhere down the road you might go, gosh, I'd like to do this. Let's problem with somebody. And the question would be the same thing I got. Did you bring any money? So anyway, that was our project. Both of you, nationality-wise, I appreciate this. I had special bottles of wine made up with this as the label on the wine to give to my teammates and to provide the gas price. So that's us. That was the flight. That just finished. In fact, the final report just went about a minute ago. We've been asked by Intuitive Machines. If you're not familiar with it, Intuitive Machines did the first commercial landing on the moon. We're 2 years ago, maybe. They made the second. It was probably by that time it was the fourth, but they made the second landing. Both times theirs took place. That was the launch. That's their lander in there. That was looking out at the launch pads from the 7th flight. We got to come out with that. This was the pre-launch part. Gotta do what you gotta do. Maria, myself, this is Dr. Freeman, and this man here is Dr. Alfredo Jimenez. Great story. That business making a movie about his life right now. Brad Pitt, and the rest of the story, business making the story. He is a brain surgeon extraordinaire. He was a Mexican laborer, came across the border to do odd jobs. Somebody recognized his skills, sent him to Cal Poly, where he got his degree, where they were looking at him and said, I knew somebody at Harvard would be interested in me. Went to Harvard Medical School. He was the top of everything there. Mayo poached him, took him away from Johns Hopkins. He's the guy we're trying to work with. Both the brain cancer initiating cells, the two cancers, now it's melanoma. The two cancers that we're interested in are late stage melanoma and breast cancer. Both of those are metastasized in the brain cancers that are really ugly brain cancer. There's very little you can do about it. In fact, one of the people I'm working with, his husband died 6 weeks after his diagnosis from metastasis. So we want to understand that process. Where does the living transformation take place? How does this happen? And if we can see these cells progressing in a more advanced rate, and then microgravity, which we do. Stem cells right now, we all have them. 3 to 5% of your body's cells are stem cells. But yes, you don't do them. And the older you get, you guys are still, you still have something here, you still have something here. Oh, John, you guys. So anyway, that's the work that he's doing. He made one of the more interesting comments that we did a little bit away from the launch. He said, you know, when I'm doing brain surgery, sitting there holding this brain, everything this person ever was or ever will be is in my hands. I made the wrong choice and I got out pretty good. I don't want to do it. But that's what we're working towards. Intuitive Machines is going to build a low Earth orbit vehicle called Zephyr, which will use the same capability to come back and land on Earth. So now you can launch. That's a Falcon. Launch to do however many turns you need, come back and land, maybe in the mail. So instead of going through a 6-month process of trying to develop enough cells, you can do it in an afternoon. We don't know. That's what we're trying to learn. So that's intuitive machines. And again, because you treat people like people treat me like I live. I was having lunch with somebody I'd known for 30 years, didn't know what she was doing at the time. They asked me, putting our books together, and then they would leave. Hey, what are you? Would you? Yes. I can't emphasize it enough. She's with Sierra Space now. I don't know if you're familiar with Sierra Space. They're spin-off from Sierra Nevada. This is that's their spacecraft. It's called the Dream Chaser. They're going to fly back. That's the Dream Chaser next to Atlantis, next to the shuttle, just to give you an idea of size. They were going to do ballast in the back of the first flights, and they said, rather fly science, if you got some. I got science for you. So I'm working with every level as a backup. I've got a team there that's working on it. My specific thing was I had to do cancer. I'm not into we supported regen vital people. I'm into cancer 100%. That upper picture, again, gosh, I don't take very good pictures, but this is a habitat, it's an inflatable habitat. The ISS is doomed in the 2030s, the latest that the ISS is to be orbiting. So NASA's put out contracts to different companies to develop what they call a commercial destination of LEO, LEO being low Earth orbit. And that is what Sierra is focused on. You can put a bunch of these things together. And it's actually 3 stories inside there. So there's crew quarters, there's storage, and then there's a laboratory. So that's what I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to. Of course, the Dream Chaser will take stuff up there. Ultimately, the Dream Chaser can take people. And right now, it's not designed. So that's kind of where we are with what we're working on. And I will try to, I'm doing much slower than I wanted to. I talked about this already. Space-based medicine is our focus. That's space medicine, and that's more focused on what the astronauts out there is. And whatever. I want to know what we can do up here that makes a difference to us. That's the important thing. What can we learn in that process? And if it's something that we can do here that makes it safe, then so much the better. Regenerative medicine, as I talked about, the stem cells. Tissue engineering, we had a discussion of that, 3D matrix structure. Think about that for pharmaceuticals also. You can go up with all these structures and try to get the pharmaceutical quantities or whatever else to come up with that. We're doing a lot of genome work right now, organogenesis, the Holy Grail. And then tumor metastasis is where I am. That's I even put her until somebody else. Again, Peggy Wilson, she's in the Dropbox on the International Space Station project. We flew on CRS-10. That's 39. It doesn't look like this anymore when you see 39A. This was the mobile structure for the shuttle program. Cargo gear bays would open up. The cargo would be in here. They'd make and push everything into the shuttle, close the shuttle door. So that's all gone. SpaceX is taking that out and redesigning the tower. But they have not done that. This is the first commercial flight. First thing that wasn't a shuttle or a car. And this is the paper. Don't ask me to explain anything more than I already did. But it's pretty cool. Okay. I said I'd start passing these around, I forgot. This was on that. That was a company called Vector. That is Georgia. It's the only rocket I've ever watched out of Georgia, as in the state of Georgia, not the country. I don't know how many rockets they launched. That was the first and only rocket we launched out of Georgia. This was on it. This is CubeSat. You see it's banged up a little bit. See the pine trees out there? Hit the pine trees and everything back down. I got a call on Monday night. I could hear beer bottles in the background. Hey, if you got a payload, you can fly and I can put one together when you need it. Wednesday morning. Okay. So I went to Walmart, I got a jug. I live on a lake, it's got cyanobacteria, green. See it on the Indian River, do that. It's a big problem up there, especially with the climate. Especially if you're feeding water. So inside, it's still there. I never even anything but there's still a jar in there with some cyanobacteria in it. But this is what, if you haven't seen CubeSat, think of this having solar panels that pop up and stuff like that. That's what a CubeSat is. 10 centimeters cube, that's where it came from. And I got this straight from Bob Twigs, that you can pass that around if you like. I'm not a Beanie Baby person, but apparently the box that Beanie Babies come in was 10 centimeters cube. That's where he came up with that particular, why 10 centimeters. So, this was a mock-up that he had just within what's called 2U. 1U would be that, 2U would be 2, 3U would be 3. Now you've got all kinds of things. But countries and states and everything else, this is kind of beat up. They have become spacefaring nations because they have a CubeSat flying in space. A lot of interesting things you can do with them. I went to presented at a CubeSat conference, and Bob was wearing, this is an old guy. Bob's an old guy. Bob's wearing a pair of jeans, and so he's standing there and he says, "What would you call this?" And the NASA guys are all like, "Debris." It's called a pocket cube. And there are countries that are flying pocket cubes. You guys know who Carlos Santana is? Music wise? No? Yay! I had a friend who I met who was working with Industrial Light and Magic. Those guys, her office was right next to the stage for Star Wars. In fact, she couldn't wear a crepe soles when she went to the airport because she picked up so much explosive powder walking across the floor that she set off all over the sectors of the airport. But anyway,
So, what is this?
what's inside? Oh, it's just foam that I put in with. Yeah. I tried to push it a little bit. Anyway, I suggested, she was in a meeting and I said, I've got this great idea for Carlos Santana. Have you ever heard the sun or any of the stars? They pulse at a certain frequency. It's like 50 hertz. Carlos Santana, you guys will have to define this because it's really easy to just quantify it or something. Anyway, it always starts off with the congress or something. He was big at Woodstock, that's all I remember. I was not at Woodstock, I'm the only person my age who wasn't there. I've since. But anyway, the idea was to put one of his new songs on a pocket cube and then have it over the air playing the new song and tell them what the frequency is. I love the idea that we do this. That's a pocket cube. This would be a pocket cube dispenser. That's what we can find out. I suggested this to our Noah. Put a bunch of things together, all in formation so that you could do synthetic amateur radar work and stuff like that for satellites. I'll get those. So anyway, we launched the state of Tecnología, we launched the Centro rockets out here. You already saw that one. That was the paper we had. The paper that came out of that.
Sorry.
That became the one now. Yes.
I'm trying to understand the thing, like, what information you get from training bio training? It's like, is that something I have to check out?
One of the things that we're going to microgravity, way back when.
Anything, I mean, this that newspaper is talking about, when you discover that country, things that happen here that you discover over the space. So I'm like,
You're speeding up the process. Sometimes that's what it is. The sex change, or not sex change. The sex difference in how a female and male respond to food investment came from this work.
you like that, you highlight rapid, that's something that happens.
Yeah, and that's what we don't understand completely right now, what we're trying to do. We'll hear the origin story right here, right now. Way back when, they wanted to find out if they could predict whether somebody going to Mars would develop cancer sometime while they were going. while we were there, while we were back. 6 months to Mars, not going to go to Mars, 6 months trip, spent 3 days, bouncing around on the surface, then came back. We're going to be there for 6 months to a year, and then they returned. So what they did was they took, oddly enough, this is how I got interested, they took the government and they put them in what's called a horizontal wall bioreactor, or a rotating wall bioreactor, or a hot tub, depending on how you want it. And all it does is spin those cells, and so they're in constant free fall, as long as you're, that's what the satellites are. Anything in orbit is in free fall. Gravity is pulling it towards Earth. If it's got any kind of energy at all, it's going this way, it's not. You have to boost the International Space Station because it's being pulled back. So they determined that cancer cells. Okay, you see that again? You see the pictures? This was the lab we had working. This is it's kind of a neat approach. I just bring it up again because you guys are all on the cusp of doing stuff like this. This is how Dr. Clements looks at everything that's in avatar patient. So if he has your cells on model, he considers those reality. He's flying you in space if he flies you around. Kind of a neat process. But there, that explains exactly what it is that you were just asking. To be able to do that. Breakthroughs that we've had, you guys compliment most of these anyway. I've been involved in a couple of them, regenerative medicine, disease research. A little bit of supporting growth food in my background. So that's an actual photo. I love this. Those are CubeSats being picked out of the Kibo mountain on the ISS. There's a Japanese one. Additive manufacturing is what we do with the biocream. Natural disaster response. Physics. This is where I started when Tom and I were talking about I've got these projects that I would love to do for you guys to be honest, 100%. And you have to do with Earth exploration. And if you're not following what's going on in the United States right now, we're not doing a whole lot. We have others over the gap, but probably will have to do this years. There are a lot of things that happen in the world that you can see from space much better than you can see around or verify those things. So I just want to do a real quick section on this, and you'll see these are some of the capabilities that you have. I ran for the French. I have a not-for-profit called the Argos Foundation. Argos are satellite tracking devices that we use for tracking animals, organisms. It's for tracking boats, it's for tracking animals. I also had the Centro for Space Station, where we were able to predict conditions just by looking at radar attenuation, reflectance, and things like that from satellite models. Some of the applications, and again, how this applies to Chile or Argentina or the United States or others. These are all things that can be done. So I was with Argos, I headed up the Argos Foundation. We were mostly focused on tracking, animal tracking. And then Centro Space Station, we were starting to physics problems. There was a company called Sea-Launch. They were taking a whole platform down to 154 degrees west on the equator and launch rockets. Launching from the equator, you can go into any inclination. That's why Europe launches out beyond it. Because it's close. So we support them. It's almost like a weather chart. It's not the weather chart. You can see and you get, because it cost them $1 million a day. It took them 10 days to get down. So if they had to sit and wait for the weather, unfortunately, we went out of business. We improved the work and we went out of business. This is another vaccine journal coming out of the what you're looking at is radar altimeter. That's the height of the ocean. It's being measured by itself. And as it changes. Until we saw this, until we started tracking the satellite tracking sea trials, and we're here. The Archipelago, which is tracking weather back centuries. Until that happened, we would see, it's only the female sea trials that we would see, males we didn't have. But they would go up to about here and hang out, so everybody thought, okay, the sea turtles aren't eating off the nest. So they're going up and eating off of their legs. Now that's not the case at all. What happens is they get caught up, this is the Gulf Stream. They're getting caught up in gyres and making circles 2 or 3 times around. Then they realize, oh wait, I still want to go to work. I've got to break out of this. So that's exactly what this is. What you don't see is that it comes down to Europe, and apparently the females are eating the males off the coast of West Africa. So it's a 2-year process. Every 2 years you see the females. So grab up the track. We had no idea. This is really high water compared to everything else. That's really critical. Makes sense, right? Cold water gets you. So warmer water should be there. So again, you can look at things like sea surface temperature, heat exchanges, some of the things that you can get from this. Not surprising. You've got the Amazon River right here flowing out. And these change, these are seasonal. This is chlorophyll, so what we're looking at here is plant. So it's called plant activity, so we're looking down where things are growing and where they're not growing. This is a project that we worked on. This is Florida, over here, the west coast of Florida, Cuba. This is what's called at this point, it's called the Florida current. It comes up, it makes a big arc, and it comes down through the Keys and comes to the Gulf Stream going up the coast. It's called the loop current in here. This part of it, as you can see, it's a loop. When you see WCE, those are warm core eddies. So it's warmer water that spins off of the current and moves across. We were doing some data processing, we were looking at satellite imagery, and we learned that people that were, in this case, we found bluefin tuna would spawn on the warm core eddy. So they would put, you can't fish in this warm core eddy. Well, that's a fixed place. The fishermen figured out that the warm core eddy is going to move out of there. They're just waiting for it to come out of the box. Hurricane Katrina, which was devastated Louisiana. Hurricane Katrina followed a warm core eddy right up until the day before. There was a Cat 5 on the warm core eddy. It jumped to a Cat 3 when it hit the islands. But that's how it transited across the Gulf Coast. And then there's a lot of oil patterns. Vertical structure is very important. So now we know what eddies are. This is all satellite information. We never really got that was to develop this. We brought the 3 of them together and started all 3 of them studying when we developed something that was the same for all 3 of them. How much money do you bring? Imagery again, this was one of the earliest ones, large activity spectrum. That was Mercury passing. That of course is Apollo 17, the last time we went to the moon. That's a hurricane. That's forest fire detection. This is the one that's in the big sun. Yeah, these are satellite images. Okay, this is just a couple of years ago. Volcano explodes. That's what we're after. There it is. There's satellite imagery we got to call it. Radar electrometry we already talked about. That's radar sat. All this plays into what our idea is because, again, because of reflectivity with the radar, we're going to tell you might have those legs or something like that. This is in the Gulf of Mexico. Tracking. Good website. You can do this. Tagging pelagic predators. It's run out of Stanford, out of Hopkins Space Station. Dr. Mark, a lot of times that. These are all different animals that are being tracked at any given time. If you manage to get about 50 or more researchers together, they'll put their data on there. And the things in the book, leatherback sailors, the tuna, almost always in the same place. Blue whales, something else in the same place. Some of those are white sharks. They track white sharks. So there's a lot of stuff that you can learn. If you just remember tagging changes in times. Tracking transponders, I've got some of those around. That's a white shark off of South Africa. Barbara's in the picture. You can see the tracking devices on it. Again, sharks don't necessarily have to be on the surface, so how do you get it? It's programmed at a certain amount of time. It pops up. They can go out and get it down and all that. They actually use the start of sunrise and the end of sunset through the ocean to be able to tell where it was. To be able to determine. So there's either snorkeling or wherever you go. That's a leatherback with a new tracking device on it. 2,000-pound trillion of each jellyfish. That's a peregrine falcon. Again, you might get these in the other countries. This particular one started in Finland and now in South Africa. They fly about 50 miles an hour most of the time. We didn't know any of this stuff. They decided to track it. And again, eventually it bolts and the feathers bolt the tracking device. Okay, I'll just do it quick. That's what shipping looks like at any given time. That's a snapshot. That's a snapshot of your world, shipping wise. Putting it all together, we were given 4 keys to put all the project. And this is the project that I'm throwing out for you guys. And I'll be happy to play it also. The French are doing this in the Caribbean Islands, Patagonian toothfish, which our country we call it Chilean sea bass. Just like see the dinner the other night, I paid $25 for my hobby. If I had a Chilean sea bass, I paid $55. So that's the difference in the value of it. So they patrol the Caribbean Islands, which are in the middle of nowhere down the coast they are. So he's using that idea that we're going to lead us on one side, and then we got Robin Hood on the other side, which is setting markers to be protected over the world. So the idea is how do you protect the species in those areas? How do you manage fishing? How do you manage the tools? It's a combination of satellite products, radar AIS, that you track from the Chinese who do not use AIS. So anyway, so we developed what we thought would be a good plan for that. Here's my contact information.